I wrote it as a human being writing a memoir. And of course, I'm transgender, so that's there, that's in it, right? But my wish, my hope was that trans people would see themselves reflected if they read it, and see themselves like be able to maybe find some solace in the journey and in the togetherness of our journey. But my desire was also for everyone else, for cis people, who may not feel like they have anything to do with me, to be able to pick up the book and that our and see our overlap in humanity.
Good evening. I'm Susan Spurlock, Executive Director of Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University, and I'm delighted that you've joined us for this evening's program, Healing Through Story, an antidote to loneliness and a greater sense of belonging, a conversation with author Miles Borrero upon the publication of his book, Beautiful Monster, A Becoming. Miles, I'd like to welcome you to Ford Hall Forum, and I'd like to congratulate you on this brilliant book. In Beautiful Monster, Miles chronicles his unusual childhood, by turns riveting and hilarious, in 80s and 90s Colombia during the Pablo Escobar years, as well as his move to Salt Lake City to pursue acting and the winding trajectory that eventually lands him in the New York City yoga scene. Within these very different cultures, the realities of being queer and trans echo poignantly through the triumphs, heartbreaks, family dynamics, spiritual pursuits, and relationships that propel Miles along his path. Sublimely nuanced and written in ravishing prose that is uniquely and irresistibly as its subject, Beautiful Monster is one person's story of navigating the pressures to perform femininity while becoming a gender outlaw, brimming with wonder, humor, mythos, entertaining and enlightening in equal measure. This book offers a compelling case for embracing one's true nature. Borrero is by terms funny and gut-wrenching, doggedly keeping the proceedings from tipping into melodrama, even when the emotional terrain gets gnarly. Readers will be captivated by this always inspiring, sometimes shattering story of self-discovery. And that's praise for the book by Publishers Weekly. In addition to Miles being the author of this beautiful book, he's a New York City-based senior yoga teacher, a wellness educator, a speaker, a music maker, and a craniosacral who has been studying, practicing, and teaching the science and philosophies of yoga, medication, Buddhism, and Tantra for over 25 years. And as a Latina queer trans person, Miles is a passionate advocate for dismantling the systems within ourselves that keep us small. And it is now my pleasure to introduce this evening's moderator, the awesome Pascale Florestal. Pascale is a Boston-based director, dramaturge, educator, writer, and collaborator hooked on developing theatrical experiences that shed light on the narratives we rarely see on stage. She's a three-time Elliot Norton nominated director who's worked around the city in theaters, including the Huntington Theater, the Suffolk University Modern Theater, Speakeasy Stage, the Theater Offensive, and across educational institutions in the area. She serves as the education director and associate producer at the Front Porch Arts Collective, the premier Boston theater company committed to advancing racial equity in Boston through its theater. Pascale, take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's so great to be here. And thank you everybody for joining us. Miles, thank you so much for this book, for this opportunity. I'm just so excited to get to talk about it. I had such a lovely, beautiful journey reading your journey, and I can't wait for us to dig into it. And I think just to start us off with the book, of course, there's so many beautiful themes that we've kind of talked about as we were preparing for the conversation. But I'd love to talk about this title, Beautiful Monster, where it came from and how it came to be for you, the title of this book.
Thank you so much. And thanks for doing this with me. I'm so excited to chat. Well, I wanted the title to be provocative because I think the thing of being queer and being trans is provocative to the structures that exist in place. And there's something about queerness and monstrosity that I think are I sense that a lot of us, because we felt like we don't belong for a long part, a big part of our lives, that we have an affinity toward monstrosity in some ways. And it's also a word, I think fear is used a lot against us. And so I also wanted to reclaim the word monster. And I also think there's something interesting about saying a beautiful monster, like if we see a blowfish or one of those like weird looking fish in the ocean, we don't go, oh, it's so ugly. You know what I mean? It's just we're like, oh, that's what it is. Or that I just think we're so much more curious about, other species perhaps. And there's something about bringing the monster into the picture that I think asks of the reader to expand their notion a little bit. And if you look at the cover of the book, which maybe it's a little too, but it's kind of like crinkled paper, and you can kind of see a line through it. So it's very subtle, but it's yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to play with asking the questions and seeing what came out of the questions.
Yeah, which I think is so perfect for your story, because I think what is so personable about it is all the questions we get to be with you as you question yourself and question your journey and find who you are, which actually leads me to my next question. So much of the book talks about belonging and loneliness, and similarly to your connection with this beautiful title you came up with, I'd love for you to talk about your journey moving through loneliness to find belonging, and what was that like, and if there was anything in the book specifically that you wanted to touch upon that.
Mm. Well, on the one hand, I didn't feel lonely because I always felt very loved by my family and my friends and the people around me. But there was a part of myself that did feel out at sea, in terms of just I think later on I was able to understand that that was like lack of representation and lack of seeing myself in the world. So there was that loneliness. And I think I'm amazed when I look back at how very small moments of um, like a recognition of something that was there by someone else, and oftentimes strangers, gave me a really like strengthened my sense of belonging of myself to myself, which I think, like I think we talk a lot about belonging, like belonging to other people or belonging to the world, but I think we sometimes don't give ourselves the grace to actually simply belong to ourselves. It's like we've been kind of taken from ourselves to fit into all these systems, and we forget that that's the first kind of belonging. And I think because I've been a yogi for so many years, I think I'm coming up on 28 years or something of practicing yoga, which is a long time. It's like more than half of my life. I think there's something that happens with our yoga practice where we become um, engaged with our breath, and we create a relationship to our life force, our breath. And I think creating that relationship day in and day out, it kind of starts to shape your insides, and it really brings you into the backbone of the thing of who you are. So I think that has also been a big um, a big part of strengthening my ability to still be here, that strengthening of like of this is me, I am okay, like this is exactly who I was meant to be, this is exactly how I came in, this is exactly, like everything that's happening is exactly what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. And I so appreciate you saying that, because I think that that reminder of that self-love, I feel like I think you've got it right in the money. We forget that part. We're always, told to think of so many other things. And I felt that so much in reading your book. And there's so
Mm,
many passages where we are with you questioning and trying to figure out that journey. And I, as a queer person myself, and as someone who's married to a trans non-binary person, it was so validating to see that, and like you said, to see that representation, be reminded that, oh, that is a real thing, that what that experience life is valid, it's beautiful, and let's lean more into that. And I think, as you talk about the belonging, you talked a little bit about family, and so I kind of want to go into that, because I think for me,
sure.
that that family and community and that chosen family has really been the place that has given me the opportunity to like find my best self. Could you talk about how you structure that in the book, and how we go from the different ways you find family?
Mm. I start with my own family because it's the place that we come from, and and I think I really wanted to focus the story on myself more than them, but of course our stories are also shared, so there's a lot of commingling of the stories. But I think you know when I was a young person, when I was really young, when I was little, before puberty, I think one of the things that has helped me the most in my journey was that I did feel like a very strong sense of belonging to my family in those years. And then as I hit puberty and sort of became more awkward in my existence, and I think that's not particular to trans people. I mean, I think puberty is just weird, right? Having a body is a weird thing. Yeah. And as we develop, I mean, we may or may not be developing in the way that we want to, or, but I think it's confusing and it's overwhelming for everybody. So, and then, as I start to discover my queerness, and as I start to discover, sort of the beginnings of starting to recognize that there's something else going on, then my friends and well, really, like, my friends become really an essential part of my family, because they become the cheerleaders and the people who are willing to sit with me in those difficult spaces in the first years. And also that I think sometimes they didn't necessarily know where they sat. So I think we were all kind of like sitting in this unknowing together. And there was a bond that was created from that, and then as the story progresses, it goes through, um, I wanted the story to span several lovers of mine, several partners, because I also feel that there's something very distinct that happens in queer relationship, which is that because it's so challenging, or at least for me, it has been so challenging to find people that are truly in my corner, we're not so quick to throw those relationships out. I feel like the cis straight world oftentimes, it's a little easier. It's like, oh, well, you're not with me, then I don't want to have anything to do with you. But I think because we're kind of discovering so much in those early years as queer people, maybe some relationships are not there they don't remain as romantic relationships, but they still doesn't mean that they're not seminal relationships in terms of who you become in the world. So there was something to me that was really important about highlighting how essential the people that see you when no one else is looking, become to keeping us here in the world, and to keeping us being able to exist as ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that was so refreshing to see, because I feel oftentimes we don't get to understand like how important all of these relationships, whether they are romantic or platonic, and we get to experience that with you, with I know with your best friend that you grew up with, like seeing that relationship evolve, I thought was so important to, I think of, like the queer canon of literature. Like we need to
Mm.
know that this path can veer in so many ways, but it is so informative to that, I feel like that destination that you're reaching towards, which is becoming who you have always meant to be, which I loved. I'm going to shift
Thank
gears
you.
a bit because, again, connecting back with the book, as a theater artist myself, I loved seeing your journey. And so often when I talk to students, I always remind them like theater can really be an opportunity to show you so much of yourself. And just because you may not be doing theater, there are still parts of theater that have informed your work. And I'd love for you to speak about how your artistry has continued to inform, or your theater background continue to inform the work that you do now, and how it's informed your journey as well.
My theater background has been essential, I think, to whom the person that I've become, and it has enabled that to a really like beautiful degree, because theater is an embodied art, and being able to spend so many years in the thing of embodiment, in the wonder of the human condition, in the study of behavior, how humans behave, and why they would possibly behave in different ways than I would behave, and the practice of imagining myself in someone else's shoes. I mean, the practice of imagination alone, I think we're I don't know if we're losing it or we're losing the verb for it, but I feel like our creativity, if I didn't have a wild imagination, I would not have been able to imagine myself into this shape,
Mm.
into this form. And I don't mean shape like physical shape necessarily. I mean this current iteration of existence. And I think that something that my theater training did really amazingly was it inspired that. It asked of me to dare to be wild in what I could imagine, like to not just go for the median or the lowest hanging bar, but to be like, well, what else? What else? To be a seeker. And so I feel like it's had everything to do in who I've become. And I feel like as someone who went to conservatory twice, I went to undergrad in a conservatory for 4 years, and then I did 3 years in an MFA program. And that was just a window of my acting experience, right? I spent a lot more years trying to do the thing professionally. I think there's sometimes a sadness for theater artists when um, because it's such a hard lifestyle, when they decide to switch or do something different, almost like they're abandoning or they're neglecting a part of themselves. But I feel like there's nothing is lost. All our education, everything that we do in life, it's gotten us to this point. And everything we do from this point forward is going to get us to wherever else we're going. So I feel like for me, none of it has been wasted. And it was really like a worthwhile undertaking when it happened. And I sucked the marrow out of it. And then I realized, like what, 15 or 20 years later, I was like, oh, crap. I've been trying to play other people because all I ever wanted was just to be myself, um, masterfully, to be like the best iteration of myself. And then I just realized that I needed to shift, but I do think it's been essential in my awareness and in just cultivating my backbone and in being able to imagine and reach.
Yeah. Oh, of course. And I so appreciate you lifting that up, like that opportunity to dig into yourself more through that creation, through the imagination. And I think we forget that, like that's why the arts are important. That's why we need them. They give us that opportunity to look at things in a way that oftentimes we don't really think of in our everyday life because we're just not thinking in that way. And that's so much of what I loved about what you reminded us in the book. And then it reminded me a lot about healing. And we talked a little about this as we prepared. And I'd love for you to talk about how writing the story healed you and how you hope people who read this story may heal or may find their own healing through it.
Writing the story was so healing for me. I really, if those of you who are watching, if you've never gone back and kind of tried to piece your story together on paper, it's really a fun, worthwhile undertaking, even looking at the hard stuff, because there's something when you're able to kind of look back, you can you can almost change the story, the perspective of the story, and see other sides that you haven't been able to really examine. And so some of the healing came from that. Some of the healing came from just people reading the book, people that I love, friends, family reading the book, and just and expressing a greater sense of understanding, and being seen, and that felt really healing. And there's just been so much connection on top of that with people that I don't know, whom I've never met, that also have read it and have had their response to it. And that has also been very healing. I think our stories heal the world. And the first thing that you know our stories are the first thing that gets attacked. Like, look at all the book bans that are happening. And because if we tell our stories are a way in which we can really connect with people. And when we connect with people, our hearts open. Maybe you don't necessarily change a mind directly, but you do open a heart. And when that heart opens, there's a chance of greater understanding. So I do think that it's this revolutionary tool that we always have at our disposal. And when we use it, it actually does change the world, and if we don't use it, then we don't change the world with it.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I kind of think you talked about with representation, right? That opportunity to have your story be told and be seen validates other people who are reminded of you or have similar parallel experiences. And I think that's so important. And that's why this book is so important. And I'm so grateful that people can access it and read it and connect it, I believe, with people in their own world in the way that maybe they didn't have an opportunity to because it wasn't there, or at least it wasn't known. And I think that's the reminder I try to remind myself this book and of so much of the people who I know and love who also go through the same experience. Um, my last question before I want us to hear from you to do a little reading for us, could you talk a little bit about your experience understanding your gift and how that gift for you, whatever you qualify your gift to be, has gotten you to this place that you are today and where you see it taking you?
I think my gift is related to part of what I wanted in writing the book. And yeah, you can say, like it's hard to market, I guess, a book like this, because what do you call it? Do you call it a transgender queer memoir? Do you call it just a memoir? I wrote it as a human being writing a memoir. And of course I'm transgender, so that's in it, right? But my wish, my hope was that trans people would see themselves reflected if they read it, and see themselves, like, be able to maybe find some solace in the journey and in the togetherness of our journey. But my desire was also for everyone else, for cis people, who may not feel like they have anything to do with me, to be able to pick up the book and see our overlap in humanity there too, because I think that that's really like, that's really where I feel like greater understanding can be born. And I think my gift is, you know, this book is kind of a synthesis of my work in some ways, even though it's a literary book, it's not didactic, it's not necessarily educational, even though there's a lot of education in it. Like I really wanted people to pick it up and feel like they could become the most extraordinary version of themselves at any point in their lives, whenever they chose to, that they could become the shiniest, brightest version of themselves, whether trans or queer or non-binary, doesn't matter. Like wherever you sit on the spectrum of all the things, that you could shine your light brighter and more actively out in the world. And that's I think that my gift is somewhere in there. Like as a yoga teacher, I feel like that's what I spend my days doing, is inspiring people to be the kindest, kind of fullest, most caring versions of themselves. And that's what I've strived to do in my life with my friendships and my relationships. So I think that my gift is somewhere in the realm of giving you the permission slip that you might be needing, or whatever. Not that you need it from me, but sure, I'll sign it. Here it is. To do the thing that you've been wanting to do, to really reach for that dream, that potential, that magic, and bring it to fruition. Because if something life has taught me, is that there is so much magic, and that we are capable of so much magic, and it's in all of us.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. I just want to remind folks before I turn it over to Miles to do a quick reading from the book. After we hear the reading from Miles, we'll open it up to question and answers. So please feel free to engage in the chat if you have a question for Miles about the book, about himself, the journey, his work as a yogi, whatever you want to know. This is the opportunity to ask. So feel free to engage in the chat and we'll get to your question. Miles, you ready?
Yeah, totally. So this is a section that Pascal chose, and I'm going to read it for you. This time, I need to be on my own in a land so far from home that it's uncomfortable, dangerous even. A land where I don't speak the language. I need to feel what it is to be in the world at large, without someone's love shielding me from its realness. I need to be unprotected in a heterosexist world, to be stared at and yelled at in bathrooms, to be scorned by men and women alike because they can't peg me, to feel completely unseen, a ghost without any kind of sexual attraction or verve, a eunuch, to be noticed only as a curiosity, a circus freak. I need this, to experience it, be completely submerged in it, humbled by it, obliterated and destroyed, made so small there is nothing left of me, nothing but what can't be killed, so I can see and finally be distilled. I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am something divine. Here I understand, finally, in my bones, the depth of my beingness, that the me that is not the body, not the mind, that is divine, is both my mythical self and my essence. I'd been so scared of who I am and how people would react to me, scared of being abandoned. I had leaned on my fear like a cane, a danda. Now I'm ready to take that danda in my bare hands like the ancient sadhus of India and break it over my knee like a fucking Olympian. I'd misread the signs, misinterpreted the learning. I misunderstood. I caged myself within the very thing I loved most, and I don't need to do it any longer.
One of my favorites. Thank you so much, Miles. And as Miles said, this was a section I chose. I just really, this passage was truly so touching to me. And there was so much that I could connect with that I thought that it would just be a beautiful offering before we shift gears. I actually forgot a small little surprise. Before we move into our Q&A, Miles actually is going to share some pictures from his life. And Miles, if you want to talk about each one so people just know a little bit about you and where they came from.
Sure, this is a picture of me. I don't know how old I was, but some maybe like 5 or 6. And this is the picture that eventually kind of the cover was developed around. And I love this picture because this kid in this picture could literally be any gender. We just don't know. And the sweetness is so striking. I felt strongly that this picture needed to be in the cover. One, because my dad took it, and I felt like I was seeing myself through his eyes, and I love that. And he was, I mean, I don't know, as he accompanied me from the liminal space with the book, he was very excited about having it on the cover. And then I also feel like. Um, my thought was, who could hate this kid? There's so much fear right now, and we're being used right now as pawns, as political pawns, but we're human beings. And who could hate this child? And if you can't hate this child, then how can you hate me? You know what I mean? So it's just like I don't know, like I felt like it was a natural starting place. This is one of my favorite pictures of my dad, my sister, and I just think I just love the whole thing of it, and I feel like I'm super like this little creature that you see here is exactly like who I took so many years to get back to. And so I think it's like so clear, like the verve there is so just that's my vibe. So yeah. This story is in the book, and it's the story of my first communion. And my dad had to basically negotiate with me to do my first communion because I didn't want to do it. And so he offered to get me a blue bicycle. And this is the picture. The bicycle was waiting for me after the communion, so he made good on his deal. But I think it's a really sweet photo. Yeah, totally. This is my Uncle Ricardo, who I think of as my gay dad, and I met him when I was probably like 19 or 20. And he was my dad's cousin, and I didn't even know he was in the family until I turned like 19 or 20, and I went to San Francisco to visit. And then I realized when I walked through the threshold of their house, I realized that they were gay. And I didn't know that there was anyone gay in my family. And it was just a really like special moment. And then I lived with him many times over the years. So he was just an incredible presence in my life, and I feel very grateful to him. And I wanted to put this picture in there because this was at the height of my acting kind of years. I was on stage playing the role of Jacinta Condor in a Carol Churchill play called Serious Money. And I always played super hypersexualized Latinas, or ended up playing hypersexualized Latinas. And I think the juxtaposition of this uh, and this is kind of fun. And also it just gives people an idea.
The theater business, I tell you.
It's serious, I know.
So we do have a couple of questions in the chat, so we'll start if you're ready for that.
Sure, yeah, totally.
So could you suggest some daily practices for loss or grief and having not being accepted by your family?
Yeah, I think something simple is always the best, and something that you can do, that you can commit to. I think the practice is the important part of it. It doesn't matter so much what it is. It could be watercolors, it could be playing a piano, it could be going for a walk, it could be listening to a bell meditation. If you look for on YouTube coherent breathing bells, it'll pull up basically like a soundtrack of one bell for the inhale and one bell for the exhale. And if you do that, if you lay down and just listen to that, the bells kind of cut through your monkey mind, your thoughts, and they help you lengthen your breath and slow it down. And especially during the pandemic, I was doing this meditation every day. I'm not doing it every day now, but I'm doing it as often as I can. And when I was doing it every day, I felt like it really gave me a little buffer. Like it elevated my baseline above, so that my head was above water. So when I'm feeling stressed, that's the first thing I go to. But I think the important thing is that it's a practice so that you can come back to it. One of the benefits of having a practice is that you can come back to it over and over. And what that does is it starts to give you it's almost like from coming back to it over and over, you start to create a mapping or a landscape of your own kind of baselines, of your own thoughts, of your own emotions. And then as you come back to it daily, you can kind of gauge, oh, I'm a little under today or whatever. And then you can kind of you can learn to meet yourself in the moment as opposed to being ahead of yourself or being behind yourself. You can kind of learn to meet you with what your needs are currently. So I think the practice element is the important part, but really it can be anything. And the bell meditation is so simple. I've recommended it to all my students. We sometimes do it in Shavasana, in yoga classes. We sometimes do it together just as a bell meditation. I think it's a really great way to start.
Oh, I love that. Definitely took a note of that. So thanks so much for that, Miles.
Yeah.
Next question. Can you share your journey of finding a literary agent and search for publisher?
Sure. I'm not exactly sure how it all happened. I basically, so my partner, Sarah, was the edited the book in its entirety. And by the time it found an editor that wanted to publish it, the manuscript was in such great shape that she basically only had like 10 grammar notes and punctuation notes to give us, which is really like an astonishing thing. My point in saying that is that we had worked on it long enough that the book was pretty was stood on its own. And I think that's probably the reason why we were able to get a publisher, because I think had it been I think it's really hard as a queer trans author to get someone to back you. And even when they do, it's super hard to get the book out into the world. It's really hard to get bookstores to carry it. It's almost like an impossible, it's an uphill battle. But because I wasn't a writer, like I don't make my living off of writing, I kind of didn't care. And this is where imagination comes in, right? I
Yeah.
just wanted to tell my story, and I had this feeling that it was important. And so I just charged forward as assuming that life would follow. And it drove, I think my partner, I think it's safe to say that it drove her a little bit nuts because I would come up with these like random timelines. I'd be like, okay, in the spring, we're going to submit it to contests. And then by the fall, I want to have my summary letters and stuff so I can send to agents. But I think what that did, what those, even if they were just like made up by me, the creating a timeline for myself helped me move the project forward and actually finish it, and then the fact that it was so fully finished did two things. One, when it got to the editor, they didn't try to fuck with it, which
Yeah.
made me really happy because the story that you're reading is all the words are my words. They're exactly what Sarah and I wanted on the page. They're exactly organized the way we want. Nobody's fingers other than ours were in there. So that's really cool, I think, because it's a very loyal rendering of what I wanted. And then the other thing that it did was I think it gave us a leg up so that when we started shopping it around, it was able to get picked up because people didn't have to imagine it. It was already written, right? And then the third thing that I would say that I think was helpful was that I started submitting chapters into competitions, and my thought was that if I had anybody who said, oh, this is actually an interesting piece of writing, even if it was like the smallest competition ever, then I could write an agent, and I could say, hey, we've been recognized by this. And out of all those submissions, there was one submission that asked for a whole manuscript, and it was from the feminist press, and it was a submission for women's writing or non-binary writing. Two lessons from this. I didn't know if I fit the bill of women or non-binary, but I did feel like I lived as a woman for 40 years. So it wasn't, I didn't want to be the person to censor myself. So I sent it in anyway. So that's the first lesson. Don't be the person who shortchanges yourself. Send it anyway and make them read it and tell them, like have them tell you no, instead of you being like, oh, I possibly couldn't, And then the second thing that it did was we didn't win the competition, but feminist press became interested in the book. They didn't end up publishing the book, but because we had someone else's nod, all of a sudden, as soon as we had somebody else interested in it, 5 other people sprung out of the woodwork and wanted to see it immediately because they were like, wait, somebody read it and thought it was good? They don't even know who that somebody was, but that somebody was Nick Whitby, and he did us a really deep service, because sorry, Whitney, not Whitby. And so thank you, Nick, because thanks to Nick, we were able to actually get the right editor for the work. So but I had a singing teacher that used to have us like stick our thumbs in our armpits and yell. He'd be like, just yell. And then he'd be like, sing strong and wrong. And I always feel like, just let go of perfection and strong and wrong, babies. Just like charge forward, and who the fuck cares what other people think about your work? The important thing is that you care about it, and that gives it gravitas in the world.
I love that. I say strong and wrong all the time.
You do?
Absolutely. We're going to make some strong and wrong choices, and we're going to learn from them. And
I love that.
Learn even more. Oh, I love it. Oh, that makes me so happy. And again, reminding us like the journey isn't so linear, isn't so paved in this way that I think oftentimes the world wants or society wants to tell us. And I so appreciate you reminding us that. Oh, thanks. With the current political state that we're in right now, focusing so much on restricting transgender people's rights, how can allies counter their narratives effectively?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think I'm not sure how we can counter the narratives. The narratives have been very strong and very damaging. But I think that, and I don't know, Pascale, you might have some ideas on this too, but I think that I think it's important to realize that it's not just enough to like I'm sure some of the people on this chat are my family members and some of my friends and some people I don't know, right? But I think if you're a cis person, I think remembering that even if you've read my book, you don't necessarily know everything about trans people. Like I think it's good to continue to educate yourself and to continue to, I think supporting trans people outwardly and strong and actively is the best way. And what I mean by that is going to the protests with them and calling your representatives and being like, this is not okay. We are in a point where standing in the wings is killing us, and we're such a small sliver of the population that we don't have the numbers. We're barely hanging in by a thread. So it really is up to you all in some ways to support the community and be just blisteringly, and fervently in our corner. That's what we need. Silence kills. Yes. We need you to be loud. We need you to be disruptive, and we need you to be kind of, hardcore for us right now, because anything less than that is really not going to help move the needle.
I so agree. And I think so much what you said is so true. And so I think that a reminder to speak up, to step up. People need allies now more than ever. And I'm so grateful that we're talking about this book in this time. Like, everyone should read this book. Everyone should be reminded of the humanity that all people have and all people deserve, because at the end of the day, we are all human and we all deserve the right to live and survive and love and be happy and live this life. So I think, I always try to remind people that, like, how is your life impacting other people has nothing to do with you, and you should be so supportive of those who, because it could be you next. It's so possible, especially in this world that we live in. And the only way that we're going to change is by speaking up, by standing together, by being there for our
Yes.
brothers and sisters, our trans sisters, our trans, everybody. We all have to stand together, because it matters to everybody. It affects us all. It doesn't just affect trans people. It affects every single person too. And I hope people remember that. And that's what I love about your book. It reminds us so much of the connection that we all share regardless of gender, because it is a performance at the end of the day. It really is just a performance, and we are all still human and all still deserving of those same rights. And I hope people continue to remember that, and when something is happening in front of them, that they step up and say something and don't stand idly by, because it's too late. Enough is enough, and it's time for us all to realize that this is what we need to do in order to change the world for better, because it's not going to be better if we don't. At least that's my
Yeah. Can I just say a couple of things from what you like? The thing of coming together is so important, and I think the thing of coming together is a recognition that we're not that different, you and I.
Yes.
My gender affirming care is your gender affirming care.
It
I have
is.
friends. I have friends right now who are. I have lots of dear friends who are going through menopause right now, and guess what? Some of them are on estrogen. It's not that different from my trans female friends. And so all if I don't have body autonomy, you're not going to have body autonomy. And really, we all deserve to have body autonomy. So at this point, I think, especially with what's happening politically, the best bet we're going to have is if everybody else unites against, or unites, maybe not even against, but unites, then we are stronger in numbers and we are louder in numbers, and we're going to have a lot more pull. So I think that's really essential that you mentioned that. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much, Miles. We have two more questions before we get to start to wrap up. Someone asked, what's next for you? What do you see in the future?
Oh, well, so many things. I can't keep to one project, so I have a lot of things going on right now. Um, I'm starting to write, so I started a Substack, which is I didn't know anything about it, but I kind of am moving my blog to that Substacks, and I'm trying to. I didn't do it last week, but I'm trying to write an essay a week, just to continue writing and to continue to put my thoughts on. I find that when I write, my thoughts are more, my critical thinking becomes much more nuanced. And so it's a practice that for me, I want to continue. And I think some of my students seem to enjoy it. So I'm keeping that going. I have this fantasy novel that I'm kind of flirting with, that I've sort of started kind of as well. It's going to be like I don't know if it's going to be YA or if it's going to be erotica might be in there too. So it might not be YA, but it's going to be fantasy, and it's going to have some supernatural elements that I'm excited about. And that's just for me, for the joy of of awesomeness of creating something like that. And I've been taking piano lessons, and that's it's not next, it's like now. And so I'm kind of allowing myself to make music and to kind of really expand into my new voice, which has been super awesome.
You were talking about your music and this new love of piano, which I'm so excited to hear. We haven't asked if you are able to share some of your beautiful voice and music with us in this moment, if you're up for it.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, totally. I guess if y'all don't mind, I can do a little chanting with you. That's probably the closest I'll pull my. You're lucky that you're at home with me in my studio. Hang on, I'll grab my harmonium. Um, well, I think it's always appropriate to mix some Lady Gaga with some spiritual music. So maybe we'll do that. You guys can chant with me from home if you want. Let's see if I can remember it. You can probably hear that because it's on. Let me just take one of these off because they're noise canceling and they drive me nuts. Some of you might know the words. I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Sing it with me. I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Listen. Born this way, I was born this way. Sing with me. Born this way, I was born this way. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for how beautiful. Perfect song, perfect moment. Thank you for the person who asked that great question. So enjoyed it. Before we wrap up, I wanted to bring it back to Miles to read one last passage from the book, just to give us another tease delight from this wonderful story.
I chose this passage because I just want to remind everybody of this idea of being active allies with our community. Like I had this beautiful note that came in from somebody today thanking me for the book. It's amazing how they've come and they keep coming, you know. Randomly today I received a note, and in the note the person was saying, thank you so much, I'll recommend this book to transgender and queer non-conforming people. But that's the thing. That's the thing that we have to erode, is the belief that we are different. Much like like I like to read literature by all kinds of people. Black people, Haitian people, Colombian people, Chinese people, you know what I mean? It's like that's the thing that we need to erode, is the feeling that we're any different from one another. And so I chose this passage as a kind of reminder to us all that, you know, don't just recommend the book to your one daughter or son of a trans daughter or son of a person 5 degrees separated. Give it to everybody for Christmas. You know, like people should be this is what's gonna help us, is actually getting to know each other, since we all inhabit the world together. So this is about being a hardcore ally. I paused at the door, took a deep breath to muster up my courage, and pushed. With the jingle of a bell, the door slid open. Buenos días. ¿En qué le puedo ayudar? The man at the counter was writing something down. I need a tuxedo. He looked up at the sound of my voice. Is it for you, señorita? Is it for a play? No. Yes. Sure. Whatever. I held my ground, even if a little thrown. What's your size? I've no idea. I looked down. His expert eye sized me up. Try this and this. He handed me a shirt and pants. Latin men are small, fortunately. It wasn't hard to find a good fit. The finishing touch came with a shiny pair of black patent leather shoes. I paid and walked briskly back to the house, hugging the garment bag. It would be another hour before Mom was home. Letting myself in, I hung it behind my writing cassock in the closet. No one would look in there. It wasn't that Mom would try to stop me. She didn't believe in meddling in my business like that, but I didn't want her disapproval souring my resolve. My decision had been made, even if it was social suicide. It was the end of high school, and people were throwing lavish black tie parties for graduation. I was bound for Salt Lake City in a couple of months to study acting at a conservatory program at the University of Utah. Before heading to what sounded like the middle of nowhere, I wanted to feel what it was like to wear a tux. The elegance of it, the lines of my shoulders made broader and boxier by the edges of the coat itself. I changed at a girlfriend's, along with a bunch of other girls. When I walked shyly out of the bathroom, bow tie clipped into place with my hair slicked back into a baby butch ponytail, everyone froze mid-mascara. My friend's mom put the curler down without missing a beat and straightened my bow tie, brushing a mota, a piece of lint, off my jacket. With a wink and a smile, she added, "Eso guapo. You look devastatingly handsome." Her words and smile annihilated me, the tenderness in them. They made me feel deserving. They stung, too. Or maybe it was the tears in my eyes. She made me feel seen, naked in my evening wear. I didn't quite know what to do with that. I felt like some otherworldly, magical creature only she could see, as if I had a glorious pair of wings emanating from my back. I imagined a gust of wind ruffling their long golden feathers. Absent-mindedly, she brushed a mota off of them too. Wait, what? It tickled. She was the first in a line of sentries or emissaries, people sometimes close, sometimes perfect strangers, who led me along my path. Moments like this began to define me more than all the moments of erasure. A delicate string of beads, a mala of a different kind of truth being strung along the way. It wasn't that the other life was any less true. There was just a different one here too, in the shadow. The fact that she saw it brought it to life. I could feel the significance, the portent in her look without having any clue as to what it meant. The oddest feeling in the world is having a perfect stranger see something in you that you don't yet know about yourself.
Oh,
You don't
beautiful.
even need to know people to support them. Just saying something kind to someone who looks in distress can sometimes change their whole life. This woman probably had no idea. I remember exactly who she is, and haven't seen her in years to be able to thank her. But if I ever do, I'm going to give her a big hug and thank her, and that small gesture changed my life.
Oh, I so believe that. And thank you for that beautiful passage to remind us we are all human and we all deserve that love and being seen. So thank you, Miles. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight on this amazing conversation.
Just the greatest thank you to you, Miles. My heart is singing. This has been an extraordinary evening. Um, we got I wanted to share two more comments from the chat. One was from someone who sent this earlier: deep appreciation for sharing your incredible story as it unfolds. And just came into the Q&A box, expressing their that this was an awesome program and thanking you. Thank you so much, Miles. This was an extraordinary evening, and you are awesome.
Thanks
Pascale,
so
thank
much,
you
Susan.
so
But
much for.
thank you both for having me too. Thanks for uplifting trans voices and speakers such as myself. And thanks, Pascal, for such a wonderful interview. I just really appreciate you all so much, for allowing me to use this forum as a to be here.
And this was this was such an important conversation in this very divisive time in our country, and we need to continue to have these conversations. And thank you both for lifting up these important themes. And I just Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to our audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this important conversation. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for supporting Ford Hall Forum's important programs, and have a very, very good evening.